Okay, is everybody ready? Okay, thanks for coming out, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order and start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with the approval of the agenda. Paul, anything to add or change? Nope. Dan?
Good.
Ryan?
No.
Nope. Tim, anything?
Well, earlier, there was a consideration maybe of moving the Dodge Center ambulance up in front of our budget consideration.
Oh, sure.
So I think maybe that would be something maybe to move that G1 up to in front of the E1.
Okay, move that up right after the public forum. Okay, yep, we can do that. Anything else? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Consent agenda. Questions for administration on consent agenda? Entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thanks, Ryan. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Any visitors? Mayor's report. I'll just have one comment tonight. Last meeting, we have a malfunction with our wiring and the button for the recording, so the meeting was put on in 5 different pieces. We have the company coming to fix that. I'll watch tonight and see if the red light goes up, but I don't know if it does when it stopped recording or not.
It'll work tonight.
Okay, all right. But we'll keep an eye on that, so.
Bruce Wire, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Public forum, I don't have any cards, so let's have the Dodge Center Ambulance Tax and District discussion.
All right, including your package, you have a couple items in, and AJ's here from Dodge Center Ambulance, so would you like to say anything right
Go
away?
ahead, I'll just be here for information.
Sure. And I did email out the link to the article that one of the reporters wrote in town here, and it had some information there. So Councilor Ferris and I were able to join the folks over at Dodge Center last week, and I think we had a good discussion, and I mentioned in my report that I think we have a good understanding of where the other communities are at in their feedback. I think they understand where we're coming from as well. So included in your package, you have some items you've seen before. It's a copy of the ambulance calculations that were presented and provided by Mike Bubani for the district, and some of those costs are related to that. And then you also have the joint powers agreement, which I know Councilor Ferris has some questions on, as well as myself. And then I did email out that other document to you last week, which was the other Excel that was presented with a few different numbers and things like that. So that meeting was a good meeting. At that point, there's a disagreement about the representation and how it should work. The proposal that Councilmember Ferris and I were told to bring back would be that the CASN would have 2 votes on a board of 5. And after discussion, it seemed like having 4 members on a board didn't make the most sense, to be honest, because, the chance of tying is certainly there, whereas if you have a 5-member board, and I'm not sure if all the cities will go for that or not, but that was the proposal that, it still isn't a perfect correlation with the level of taxation, or the level of taxation would be related to it, whereas we'd be looking at 60% of the costs and 40% of the representation, but it was an improvement over the previous, so that is something that at least some of the members at that meeting seemed willing to consider, so I think that's, and Mel, if you have anything else you want to highlight.
Well, the one thing I was going to say is that the one taking away from that meeting was that there was a concern that CASN would have 2 votes by 1 member, but when we explained that it would then be potentially 2 members, so 2 city council members from CASN on this board, as opposed to 1 with 2 votes, it seemed like that was a little more palatable to the other cities, just because, like Paul and I might not necessarily have the exact same opinion on something. So therefore, it would be a little more individual discretion in terms of the voting. So that was what we were tasked to bring back to the council for discussion. I reread the special taxing district, joint powers agreement, the proposal that's in here, and this would not be final, if we were to change it to 2 members voting, because that changes a lot of the language in here. But 2 things that I wanted to clarify, with AJ, and I know you're not the lawyer drawing up the papers, so I apologize for poking you on this, but on page 3, item 11 of the agreement, it talks about how a member may withdraw from the district, and I just want to make sure that I am understanding. It says that you can give 2 years' notice before you withdraw. However, if the board votes to take on debt, even if we give 2 years' notice, let's say for the sake of argument it's a 10-year note, we're still on the hook for anything that is incurred under that note until it is fully paid off, or our portion of the obligation is
Right.
satisfied.
Whether you pay that portion off immediately or, beyond your 2-year out, whatever it may be. The current way it's written is that you owe your portion, whatever was voted on prior to you leaving,
Okay.
Same if we voted on something 5 years ago, you're still responsible for it, for that full 10 years, yeah.
Okay. And then, so my concern, and as I said at the meeting, I do recognize that the ability to have ambulance service benefits everyone in the district, and I do appreciate that fact. The concern is the sheer quantity that we are being asked to contribute with regard to the other communities involved. So that was the reason for asking for the 2-member vote. And then the only other, let me see if I can find it. I think this could be a legal error, I'm not sure, because this is not my area of expertise, but in the resolution, it says, pursuant to these Minnesota statutes, the city accepts and shall levy a tax as apportioned by the board of the district under a formula or method as determined by the board. That didn't exactly jive with what I understood we were doing.
You're correct, that will have to be reworded, because, the law states how we have to levy that, right?
Okay.
So, I think that might have been written prior to us knowing exactly how we can tax.
Okay.
But, what page was that on? I'm sorry.
It's A3, item 4.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that we got hung up on a few other tidbits, such as this voting power, that's kind of taken away from any fine-tuning of the contract.
Okay. I think those were my 2 biggest ones. And then as we discussed on the dissolution of the joint powers agreement, if the special district were to be dissolved, it would still exist until all of the outstanding debts are paid off by everyone.
That's my interpretation of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have to confirm with the lawyers on that. And I can get you guys the lawyers' contact information if you want to confirm anything, with them. That's not an issue, so.
Those were my primary questions.
Yeah, the biggest thing today, like Tim had indicated, is that tonight we're looking to get kind of you don't have to make a motion of any sort if you don't want to, but kind of seeing if you're even interested in the 3-2 type vote, the 1 per each city plus Casson gets 2 votes situation. I can say that Dodge Center and Manorville, I was at Manorville on Monday. They seem to agree with that concept overall in the end. They were okay with that. And Dodge Center's obviously been okay with anything the whole time. We just want something to happen. And so, Claremont's council meeting isn't until next week. They're obviously the next one to go to. But, yeah, essentially seeking any feedback on that type of board layout. The goal behind this, obviously, is that if we don't have 5-0, and as this was discussed during our meeting, if we don't have 5-0 vote majority of the time, we're not gonna survive, right? Like, the goal to go to this is, like, everybody's in consensus that we want this, because if it's 3-2 every time, then someone's gonna leave the district because they're not happy every single time, right? And then we can't make that work. So, the hope is that it doesn't happen that way. Obviously it can, but, yeah. Any immediate questions on that, or comments? Outbursts?
Questions for?
What would happen if we can't all agree to get the district going? What is your next step? I mean...
Yeah, so if we can't come up with a solution, right, with all of us being involved, Dodge Center the City of Dodge Center Council has to take a look at what they want for the future of their own local ambulance, if they want a local ambulance, right? Obviously, they do. We wouldn't be trying to do this if they didn't. And so they would be looking at what can they make work in terms of financial for them. We're not closing our doors tomorrow, right? Like, we're not doing that, but it's a different story, and somewhere between 3 and 7 years is a totally different story if we can't continue to most likely operate unless the federal government or state government decide to change some major things. We're not gonna have any different change in revenue, right? No matter how much we charge. And so, the options, obviously, worst case scenario, we dissolve, we go away, and essentially the process behind that looks like, giving your as license holders, you can choose to give your license to someone if they accept that license, or you can just go away and the state will come in and talk with surrounding ambulance services and figure out what is best for the citizens. And they will try to advise towards that and dish out territory based on that. Now, that's the current board's way. The current board's going away December 31st. So we are obviously multiple years away. I can't say what's gonna change in that time frame. There's just, basically, it's either downsizing or going away completely is most likely the options, if we can't get something to, work out between all of us. And downsizing isn't a great option because, as we know, smaller services are going away, right? Unless they're getting a huge financial backing, by their own city or, some businesses or something of that nature. Small ambulances are closing their doors, or, that fee looks a lot higher. So, yeah.
Okay, good question. Anybody else got anything? Paul?
Nope.
Okay, so how does everybody feel about that, as far as representation goes?
In reading things, it's odd to me that Claremont at their 4% investment has such a big say in what control we can have over this whole project. That concerns me. It just seems...
Fair.
Yeah, and it probably won't help you. But I wanna reiterate that, ambulance service is more about coverage.
Yeah.
It's not about how many times we're going to this address or how many, it's about having that ambulance available and accessible to everyone. And I know that probably won't change your mind, but that's obviously, my personal goal and the ambulance's mission is to, provide equal coverage to everybody, right? But, yeah.
So, another question.
Yeah.
Under Article 2, it says officers, and you list 4 officers for the board, but there'd be 5 board members. Are the other cities, if we go with the 3-2, where Casson would have 2 votes, are they gonna have an issue if the 2 of the board members were Casson? Or is that not?
Are there a couple combined? I think there's a couple combined.
There's a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, and a treasurer.
Under the bylaws, I think that's...
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I was thinking...
And I didn't know if that meant you picked it from the...
Right, and I think they based that off of, obviously, a 4-person, and so maybe there's another officer position, I think that, or, maybe, I don't know what that looks like. I guess if that's something where Casson, if Casson wants to make sure they have 2 officers, I guess you could call it, right? Now, the officers' roles in this board are not going to be that extensive, right? At least initially, I don't foresee that happening really, right? And so, If that's something we need to discuss, we definitely can. I guess, in that, we can talk to the lawyers and think about the makeups. I can't think off the top of my head of...
Well, and I don't know if it affects anything, I was just
Right.
curious, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't really affect anything, I wouldn't say. and-
Still a similar vote, no matter.
Right, yeah, your vote is worth the same, whether you're vice chair or secretary, your vote is still worth the same, so.
Right. And this is for capital outlays only, correct? Not for
So the way it's currently written is not that way. I know that was one of your guys' concern. Unfortunately, the other conversations took too long. We did not get to that. Although I have asked the lawyers their thoughts and opinions and maybe, can we do that even kind of thing? And we could do that. The problem is, they don't recommend it though. What they would recommend is making, anything non-capital, if this is, kind of a make or break deal, is anything non-capital, making that it has to be a 5-0 vote no matter what for anything non-capital to pass. Whereas, it's just majority for anything else, for capital, it's just majority, for any non-capital is, supermajority, so, yeah. That's the recommendation. But unfortunately didn't get discussed, so definitely if you guys have any thoughts, comments, opinions on that, willing to take that back.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable, or?
That sounds more reasonable to me,
Okay,
personally. I don't know how
Right.
everybody else feels about it, but...
yeah.
I mean, if the whole district comes together and all the representatives say, hey, this is whatever the situation is, and everybody agrees to it,
Right.
be it.
And if there is anything, the lawyers also recommended, doing that, but then also say every city has like a couple things that they're like, we absolutely, we'd hate to see this go through with just a majority pass kind of thing, like up front. We could actually list out certain things that would have to be a 5-0 vote. If there is anything of concern immediately. But if it's purely just capital operations, that's the way. And we've had internal discussions after I found that out. I've had those with Lee, our city administrator, and mayor, and it seems like they're okay with that. I have not had that conversation with the other cities yet.
It would just make, from just the way my mind works,
Yeah.
that makes sense, because it is the Dodge Center ambulance, your operations,
Right,
we're all sharing in that through our service fee. When I've had my 2 rides, I pay my bill,
right.
so I'm paying for my operations, that we would come together and
Yes.
pay more for capital.
The unfortunate thing is, right now, yes, we only need this tax district for capital.
Sure.
I foresee, probably 5 years that hopefully we get away that long, without any major staffing issues.
Yep.
But honestly, we're a couple full-time staff members away from needing operational support.
Yep.
To stay competitive anyways in that market. And so, we're not that far away from it, but we've lasted this long, so I think we can go a little bit longer. But I can't predict how many volunteers I'm gonna have, so, yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Okay.
Anybody else have comments, questions on what we just talked about?
I just had a question,
Yeah.
it's tangentially related. What's the level of funding the state had allocated for Dodge Center ambulance this year?
Yeah, the estimated amount from the coalition is it's 130-something, 130,000, we'll call it, give or take 5,000. Now, that is an estimate. It has not been released. We've all had to apply now. That deadline was earlier this month. But our actual amount, I don't think we'll know until December or something. I know they released the money like December 26th or something, the same with other money that they release, the Department of Revenue. But we won't know our actual amount, I don't believe, for a few months until they release that. But maybe we won't know till the check shows up, I don't know. But that's what our anticipated amount is. To add on to the state thing is that I don't know if any of you saw, and I mentioned this in our meeting, the state task force committee basically came out and said they're just gonna monitor everything, and that they're not gonna recommend any more funding, any more anything. They just said, yeah, we're gonna monitor what's happening, and that's the gist of what their solution is. So, we're gonna be at the Capitol again this year, fighting as best we can to get more funding, because we got we should invest $30 million every year into this, or anything like that. So, unfortunately, we can't rely on that.
Anything else? Mel, anything? Ryan? Is everybody comfortable sending back that we're okay to proceed with conversations? I mean, I had nothing signed yet or as
Right.
like I said, but
Right.
if everybody else is willing to do the 2 out of 5, we're good with that. If everybody else is good with that, and if we could have supermajority for operations and just simple majority for capital. I think
Do you
those are the
want-
sticking points.
Do you want a supermajority, or do you want unanimous for, other than capital? Because when
Or
you say-
unanimous, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Yeah, I
5-0.
think unanimous
Yep.
would be good.
Unanimous, yep, sorry.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
to me,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Sense?
I have no problems with that.
Okay. I think we
Awesome.
have an indication.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll get some language cleaned up. I like other people looking at that, so thank you. And we'll get some language cleaned up. We'll anticipate another meeting pending how Claremont goes next week.
Okay.
And hopefully be able to bring, the next time we're back, we're trying to pass resolutions. So,
Perfect.
all right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
AJ, do you have a date for when the next?
I
Okay.
don't. I'm kinda gonna wait to see how Claremont
Sure.
goes.
Sure, good point.
Whether it's needed or not.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Okay. How is that? So now we're gonna go back to E1, the budget discussion. So Tim, you've got some stuff in the packet
Sure.
about your
Yeah, and I
property
think,
taxes and...
Yeah, I mean, we can go through that. I don't know if we have anybody from the public who'd like to see the presentation we have. Ian, would you mind, maybe we'll just run through the PowerPoint, if you'd mind pulling those slides. We create that in case there's anyone from the public who's interested in knowing what kind of goes into the process. There's some guidance from the League of Minnesota Cities there as well, which just kind of talks about, obviously the council's pretty familiar with that stuff, but I'd like to try and have some things available for the public anyway. So this year's overview of our city budget, and you just can keep going through them, that's great. These are the components that make up kind of our decision-making process. We look for, we also have policies for a lot of these things. So for example, like debt management, we have a policy. Investments, we have a policy. We try for good business practices, and we try to be very transparent. That's important to me, and I notice to the council as well. So a lot of people understand this is kind of where, and it's interesting, I've had interns over the year, when I've had interns when I was in a previous city, and it's always interesting to ask them, like, how does the city pay for things? And fascinatingly, these are kids in college, sometimes getting a master's degree, and they don't really understand how the city pays for it. I can remember I had one that came in and said, oh, well, you charge for ball fields and stuff, right? I said, yeah, user fees, that is part of it, but property taxes is the biggest one. Obviously, that's always the biggest one that comes in. We do get money from user fees. In Casson, we get some money through our utilities. Those are enterprise funds that run. We do get state grants different years. We get grants, and we do bonding for cash flow purposes. And that keeps our operations running, so the day-to-day operations, staffing, benefits, and then capital, which is a big item. Obviously, nowadays, everything is getting more expensive, so. That's kind of another breakdown of where the money comes from. In cities, you use what's called fund accounting. So it's a difference between the private sector and government. And, the way the auditor says it is the system emphasizes accountability rather than profitability. That's hard sometimes. I like to, drive a profit, but with the general fund, certainly, we don't drive a profit. That's not the goal. The goal is to make sure that the projects and things that the council approves are getting paid for, and that we're even. We have a balanced budget every year. Fund accounting, these are the different funds that the city has. We have general fund on one side, along with special revenue, capital, debt service, and then our permanent funds. And the other side is our proprietary funds. So examples of our proprietary funds would be the electric, water, sewer, storm. Those are intended to pay for themselves. They're not requiring any subsidy from the taxpayers. And this kind of breaks it down, gives you a definition for you of those items. And how we track. So internally, we track monthly, quarterly, and semi-annually. We use balance sheets. We work with auditors to track our budgets and then make sure that our cash flows cover our costs. And then the council, how it makes decisions priorities. So the council takes feedback from the public, the community, department heads, they identify their own budget priorities, and then we try to sort of rank those. And part of that is having meetings like tonight where we would take community feedback, and the council decides, and then we put the information out to the public through their property tax statements. Some of the things that the council and staff take into account is strategic plans. So we do our capital planning every spring. We know what our market growth looks like, what our operations look like, and then other factors such as local and national factors that we have. So just some places where money comes from and where it goes. Obviously, as the council is well aware, the biggest single section for us is public safety, and that encompasses police and fire coverage, which is a very important thing. Only the government can provide that here in town, and so I think our departments do a good job, but it does make up close to 50% of the general fund levy. And this is just an example of kind of how you'd fill a gap with property taxes, so it kind of goes to show. So if anybody has questions that, I know I'm going through it kind of fast, but I always want the folks from the public to know, especially if they don't have a lot of experience, they just haven't sat through any of these meetings, to kind of understand how things are constructed and how our budget gets put together, so it takes a lot of time. Anyways, that's all I've got for that. Then, I mean, we've got in your packet a couple other items. Thanks, Ian. Appreciate that. You've got two different budgets. I did have feedback from some members of the council. We did go through and kind of, they had some feedback, some items. In addition, I also included some CIP items from the fire department, which were requested after our last meeting. And I have two resolutions in there, one to kind of set the current number and one to set with the cut downs. So with that, I'd open up for any comments or feedback that members of the council have.
Okay, thanks, Tim. All right, so when we met last time, that was the first one that's in there that shows if you look at the percent, and then the property the capture of the new value lands at about 4.63. The new, pardon me, this is not working. I gotta get to the second one here. Does somebody have the percent on the?
Sure, 6.2, and then it would be about 2%.
Just above 2%, okay. So that was what, some of the feedback that Tim took as far as moving some things around, cutting a few things. Interested to hear what the rest of the council has to say. Anybody?
From the two different budgets, it's estimated new property absorption, it's two different numbers. Why would that? If you look at the original version, it's at 139,000. If you look at the updated, it was 162,600.
I can take a look at that. I don't know exactly, but I'll have to take a look at the formula and see what changed there.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which then that would
I mean,
change
what we
your...
do there is we capture the abatements, so there's 55, the 3597, and the 20,000, and then I'll have to see what's in that number there on the other one. But I could check on that for you, Dan. And those are all just guesses.
Sure,
You know,
no.
We don't know exactly what that's gonna look like until the county
Yep.
generates what the taxable market value increase is
But that would
each year.
change your net property tax.
Sure. Yeah, let me see what's different there.
Do they have a date where they have to have that number out?
Usually it comes in the early fall, so I mean, I would expect to see it maybe next month. And then the property tax statements are usually out, I think, the last week of November. Usually Thanksgiving timeframe is when those come in the mail,
For the proposed?
or the proposed, that's right.
If we started with the 634, we can always go down to the 2.365, we just can't go up, correct? Once we set a number, we can't go above it.
Correct. So wherever we set tonight, we can't go above, we can
But we can go
lower.
below.
Yep.
Yep.
But one of my goals over the years has been to not, I mean, we wanna have some wiggle room there, 'cause we don't know our health insurance number for sure, so we add a little extra there. But I don't like to add a lot extra. I think that just gives more room for extra expenses to creep in there that we don't necessarily, it's not how we set our budgets at home. Right, and it's a little different. I mean, I don't get to say, I'm gonna spend $1,000 this year on this, and then, but I'm gonna say it's gonna be 1,500, but I don't get to give myself a 50% raise at work just because I decided I wanted to spend the money. So, I like to challenge us to say, yeah, we need to make sure we don't kick ourselves in the shin by going too low, and health insurance comes in at 30% increase instead of the 10 or 15 we're counting on. But I don't like to have too big of a pad there either, because that just, to me, that's just my personal
Yeah.
one-vote opinion.
We don't wanna look like the state the last couple of years.
Nah, it just, it's just not how we, it's not how we do it at home. I mean, I don't get to go, you don't get to go to your employer and say, I decided to spend an extra $500, so I need a raise.
Yeah, no, good question.
We just don't get to do that. So on the one that we whittled down is the one I'm in favor of. But I would make one proposal on top of that, is to go to that, again, I'm sorry, my whole PDF system is not doing what it's supposed to do. So if we go to the one that we whittled down to 6.2, on the percent before the new property absorption, because we don't know that number for sure, but at 6.2 is what the levy would be over last year. Realized if that property value would come in at that number, would only be 2.3. But on the 6.2, I'm in favor of adding 1% to that as a placeholder, if we can help hold ourselves accountable to it, because we could use it up for anything else if we want to, but to add 43.9, whatever it would be, 44,000, which would increase that 6.2 to 7.2, as earmarked for a contribution to the ambulance service, if we don't come to an agreement on the joint taxing district by December, to say Cass and share, hey, we're in support of the ambulance service because we believe it's an important service to have available to our citizens. But if the taxing district doesn't work out, that's our contribution. Then future councils can decide if they want to keep doing that, raise it, lower it, cut it, whatever they want to do. But it shows a commitment that we're committed to our citizens to have the ambulance service. But if we can't come to an agreement on the taxing district, we're committed to still funding the ambulance service and helping go forward, but not, I don't want to see it get to where it doesn't happen, we don't account for it in the budget, and we say, hey, Jay, we got zero, sorry. That's not in the best interest of our citizens either, because the ambulance service is important. But if we can say, hey, we'll add 44,000 to that number now, we come up with the taxing district, that just goes away in December. We don't keep that in there in the final levy. So that'd just be my proposal on that. I like the version we got to at 6.2, adding 1% on if we would need that for ambulance service, if we can't come to an agreement with the taxing district by December. I think we should have a good idea by December 11th or 8th, whenever we have to have this meeting to do the final levy. I think we should have a good, reasonable expectation, or not, if it's going to move forward, but at least then the ambulance service knows that we're not just leaving them and our citizens high and dry. So, any feedback on that from anybody?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Dan, anything?
No, I agree, that's, because we definitely need a service, so we just want to make sure it's fair.
Sure.
And that's one way to...
Yeah. Paul, anything?
It seems reasonable.
Okay. Anything, Ryan?
Well, I think it's
On
fair,
that.
it's close enough, I think it's, yeah.
I mean, just, it was kind of a contingency, if we can't come to agreement on that for whatever reason, we actually do care about our citizens, and we're not trying to not think about our citizens, so that was directed. So any other questions on that, or anything else in the budget, the preliminary budget?
Need a motion on the 6.2,
We have a public hearing first, though. What's that?
that today.
On the
Hearing would be tonight.
preliminary, the public hearing, to hear feedback, but I thought it was important for us to have a discussion first, so if anybody here is here to
Okay.
speak on it, they could speak. So, anything else before we open the public hearing? Okay, with that, open the public hearing. If anybody from the public would have a comment or on the budget, if you'd come up, state your name and address, and let us know what you think, we'd appreciate it. Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. Any other discussion on the preliminary budget? And Tim asked before the meeting, and I haven't heard of any other people that we work with outside of the city that have had any numbers on their health insurance yet for the bigger group plans, so that no indication of rates.
City's getting 3.5%,
Okay,
but they're part of the co-op,
sure.
so I have not heard. I got a letter last week saying I will get another letter
Yeah.
soon with our increase.
Okay, all right, so we'll anxiously await that. So with that, any other discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the preliminary budget at a percentage of 7.2% increase over last year's levy.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mel, do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ryan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. All right. Okay, on to the committee reports, the Oscar Meadows final plat consideration.
All right, so included in your packets tonight, I did include the final plat exhibit for Oscar Meadows. The council did approve the preliminary plat back in April, so now this is just the final plat. Just a couple of small changes between the two, but nothing that would substantially alter the final version. So same general street network, same number of buildable lots, which would be 46 lots for single family by Bigelow Homes. And so there are just a couple of things that would need to be fixed. The city engineer did present some comments that would have to be addressed regarding the construction plan set. And so with that, I did include the resolution, which has a couple of conditions that would go with the approval of this final plat. Let's see. I've got the payment of the development fees, and then again working with the city engineer's comments to make any corrections needed for that. And then I also did include a draft development agreement in the packet as well. If there are any questions from the council, I could work on that.
Any questions for Ian on that? Thanks, Ian, appreciate it. All right, any other discussion? Or any discussion? Entertain a motion to approve the resolution approving the final plat of Oscar Meadows with the conditions that are attached.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan, do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thanks, Paul, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Okay, and development agreement, was that? Okay.
Be looking for approval on the development agreement
Yep,
as well.
now we just got to that. Okay, so Ian, anything on the actual development agreement?
It's a pretty straightforward development agreement. Just want to say that it covers the first phase, which is pretty much just the south half of that larger lot, and so an additional phase would be a different agreement. Other unique thing is just the consideration of the open space area kind of on the west side with the trail. Consider that as approximately the same value as what we would collect for parkland dedication. So just crediting that amount towards the development fee.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Any questions for Ian on that or discussion? All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Oscar Meadows subdivision development agreement as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan, do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ryan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. And thanks for putting that together, Ian, and being clear on it and the conditions on the first one and everything communicated clearly. Appreciate that. Thank you. On the okay, we already covered old business. New business, call public hearing on establishment of TIF district. Get to my page there.
All right, so this one is a request for a housing TIF. The EDA did hear a presentation about this request earlier this year, which they did do favorably and recommended that the council move forward with that one. And so I've been working with Mike Bubani from David John Associates, just presenting what we have for this request right now, which is approximately 146 units of townhomes, and I believe approximately 15 single-family homes, also Northwest Casson. And so to get the process going with developing the TIF plan and all of that, just ask for this resolution to be approved, and then also sets the public hearing date, which would come on December 11th.
Okay, thanks, Ian, appreciate that. Any questions for Ian on that before we call for the public hearing?
Where is this, the proposed parcel roughly?
So right now, this is part of the property that's owned by Shruti Enterprises. So it's on the east side of 8th Avenue Northwest, far north of the Veterans Memorial Park.
It's just north of the Marty's Horseshoe.
Okay, thank
So
you.
right across from Wilkers, the northeast there. There is a plat, not a plat, but a concept design and Dropbox.
Okay,
So if you take a look at that, it'd be the next document in your packet.
I see it, but I wasn't
Yeah,
really
no,
clear on
that's a
my
good
end.
question. Yep, it's in kind of that mid-northwest area across from Wilkers, so.
Kind of south of the reuse center that the county built.
It's right across from where Oscar Meadows will be building, so.
Okay, do you need a vote on the public hearing calling, Linda, or can we just call that?
You can just
For December 11th?
You can just call it.
Okay, so we'll make, December 11th, we'll be having a public hearing regarding the TIF district in Northwest Casson.
Did Mr. Schramm get a chance to speak at all, or?
Mr. Schramm would like to say anything?
I told him he didn't have to come, but he came anyways, and I mean, you know, he drove a long ways, so give him a chance here.
I didn't realize.
No, well, thank you. No, I actually have no comments. I'm just here to see if there was any questions in regards to it, that's all.
I'm good. Thank you for coming, though, appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Schramm? All right, thank you for coming, appreciate it. So December 11th, we'll have a public hearing regarding the TIF district request.
The resolution, sorry, it does actually ask for who made the motion and seconded it. So
Well, thanks, Ian, that's why I asked that.
Well, he went hardcore on that, didn't he?
Thank you.
Ian's covering all the bases tonight. So Ian, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve calling for the public hearing on December 11th.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thanks, Ryan. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mel, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The public hearing is official now, Ian, for December 11th.
If you do have any questions, though, let me know if it comes up between now and then, because I will either give you Mr. Schramm's number, or you can email him directly and ask him, because I know he's got all kinds of good stuff. You know, when I talk to him on the phone, he likes talking about all the good options with the new housing and stuff like that, so he's ready to answer any questions anybody does have, so.
And just, we're gonna go on to, the administrative report in 1 second, but there is also, just for, record's sake, October 23rd, I believe, is the date of our second meeting in October. There is a public hearing that day regarding the fence ordinance that may or may not have been cut off partially from that meeting where the wire was, whatever, so just so that's in there for everybody to know that October 23rd, there is a public hearing regarding the fence ordinance. Administrator's report.
All right. Let's see here. Got a couple of good items tonight. We talked about some of these already, but including your package, you've got a couple things regarding, of course, the ambulance. We talked about that. I've got the fiscal futures information in there, so, wow, that was a long meeting, a long couple of meetings, but they went through all the recommendations for the LMC lobby team, so there seems to be a pending disagreement between the outstate and the metro cities based on the homestead tax credits this year. The metro cities sort of put their foot down and said, nope, we're not changing anything, so that's not gonna change.
Shocker.
Yeah, right. Apple Valley was particularly effusive about not changing that. We did just complete our revenue recapture audit. That's been a project I've been putting a lot of time into, trying to get that updated. There was a number of items that were not being done properly with that program, and I think we've identified all those and worked with the folks from Minnesota Department of Revenue to correct those, and going forward, it's part of a staffing turnover, as I mentioned in our last meeting. We had kind of beefed up our finance and utility billing, and having Jessica and Kayla both kind of work on that. I know we've had a few issues this last month with utility billing, but the quality assurance side of it, I think, will improve with having more people taking a look at those bills before they go out, and obviously we want to have the right information on them. So, also I included the packet from the folks from Compass. That was a good meeting as well. Interesting to see what's going on there. A lot of our contracts are cycling out over the next 5 years, so that will mean very likely power prices will be going up. unfortunately, that just is, it's a state of affairs in the whole country, but we'll be looking at, a lot of the coal contracts that are coming off are $25 a megawatt, and so we're looking at probably $50 a megawatt for solar or for wind. And that's if they can get the queue of projects out, which is part of the issue, is that people want to build a project. A good example would be this Byron Solar. They want to build that, and whether you like solar or not, the state's allowing it, but it's also still 3 years out, potentially, until they're finished with it, and it's all hooked up. So, problematic where they have these coal plants coming off before the rest of the energy market's really ready to absorb that power. Anyway, the other thing that I wanted to just highlight tonight is the Main Street bump outs. So we had some feedback on the planters on Main Street, some more positive and some more negative, and that's not unusual. I think we expected that. We had one planter that was damaged, and I mentioned in there that we're guessing it may have been someone who had a little too much to drink or something like that. But otherwise, the planters are generally operated to slow traffic, and I've witnessed myself just driving on Main Street where you do have to slow down because you have to kind of watch it there a little bit more. However, we had some discussion, and we think that we might want to see if we would actually build in those bump outs instead of using the planters. We think it might provide a better aesthetic and a more permanent option, especially if we're working on a project in the downtown already. So, open to feedback from council. Obviously you don't have to make a decision tonight, but that's kind of what we're looking for as we kind of formulate that plan for next year's project.
Cool.
And it would be somewhat similar to kind of what Dodge Center has had on their Main Street. If you look at those, their Main Street has got graduated bump outs there with a little bit of colored concrete, and I think it does really clean things up pretty nicely and provide the same focus. And the goal then would be, what we would do is we'd move those planters off the street, probably onto the bump out, which would, we'd allow for the flowers and things like that. It would still be a good, a rollover, kind of a bump out instead of having that planter there. So, any feedback on that?
Well, part of the problem with planters, and I've seen in other cities, is little kids will get by them, or adults will duck behind them and then shoot out.
Yeah.
Thinking they're funny.
Sure.
But I've seen issues, or, like you say, people run into them, and they cause a lot of damage.
I think
The concept
the
is
bump
right.
outs would be better than the
Yes.
planters, because you're right, the planters do slow people down, because when you hit them, you stop. I've seen them hit 4 times outside of ours. We put them back, we slid it back 2 times. But one was a little old lady, nothing against little ladies, I like little ladies, but she sits way down in her car, and she was trying to take the right-hand turn where she couldn't see it. So she couldn't see where it was. And then at night, when it was raining, there's no reflective or anything in them, so someone hit them who was not intoxicated, who just didn't see it, because
Sure.
it just, when they were taking the turn. So I think something else more permanent there. The planters are a good swing, but I would personally like to see something besides the planters, just after the experiment. It does slow them down.
Yeah.
Even though the stop signs don't slow people down much either sometimes, so.
Did Mayo Clinic want to do something on their area with doing that as
painted
well?
it.
I just didn't know if they wanted to chip in with doing any of that.
I haven't gotten a lot of feedback from them in terms of cost sharing, so.
Never hurts to ask, Karen.
Yeah. I know that they
Crosswalks.
they like to have the crosswalk there, and they like having it so they're pedestrians, and that's one where I really witnessed it, where, I slowed down because there was someone standing there, and there was 4 or 5 cars that whipped past on the other side going into town, but I just stopped because you're supposed to stop when they're in a crosswalk. And having those bumpers there does kind of restrict it's kind of a traffic calming measure a little bit, where, if you're already slowing down, then you see somebody, I think it means that people will cross a little bit better at that point. So, I definitely see what the mayor's saying, if we want to avoid any accidents, they're unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think the bump outs are valuable, because it's just like the roundabouts. When you're crossing the street in the roundabout now, it's much more safe at Main Street and 57 than it used to be.
Oh, yeah.
You used to have to look both ways, because
Right.
traffic was coming both ways. Now you can only look, you should only have to look the one way. Then you get halfway, you've got a spot to sit, then you should only have to look one way, but I've seen people go the wrong way on them today.
Yeah.
Same thing with the planters, it shortens the distance to cross the street, and with more apartments being built south of town, we see much more, because our office is right on the corner, we see people out the window coming from the south side of town to Hy-Vee or the clinic or the library or whatever. There's gonna be that many more people riding their bike, walking, whatever it might be, we just see a lot more traffic. So I think it's a good idea to shorten that distance.
When we do the bump out, we gotta make sure that we have no parking near them, 'cause even on 16th Street, they've added painting along their way, but people still like to park in that area, and then it's hard to see kids when they're crossing.
Sure.
especially, you know, so you're gonna have that issue there, 'cause you still have it on 16th Street, especially when it gets really busy.
So, I think it's good, we'll give,
Yeah.
as far as Tim getting the feedback, I think everybody's in favor of
Randy, do
something.
you have anything that you wanted to add on the design component of it, or timelines?
Yeah, I guess, so at the end of the day, we are planning on reconstructing Second Avenue to the south of Main Street, to the, I'll call it the south portion of the bump outs. If we were to construct it, we would just add that to the construction project, so we're in design right now. So if there was some direction from the council, it'd be maybe appreciated on my side of things as we put the plans together. It's not a lot of effort, but as we may have more options or more things to do and tie stuff together with the road to the south, it'd be nice to know that sooner than later, so I can start getting some stuff laid out, bring it back to the council for more formal review and approval on how it all would work and whatnot, because it's a unique intersection, Mayor, I know you spend a lot of time there, so it would be good to know kind of how it's all working, pulling it together on my side of things. That'd be the only thing, is if there's some direction, I'd appreciate it sooner rather than later.
Okay. I just wanted Ian to bring up maybe just an example, and you can stroll down the street there in Dodge Center, and you can kind of see what it looks like on the corners there.
How far out are we looking on this?
We're planning next year for a second.
right there,
I'll see it. There you go, right in that intersection, so you can kind of see what they've got. So to your point, Dan, you know, you see that striped line there?
Yep.
That's where, yeah, you'd keep the parking off of the corner. And I don't know if it would exactly look like this, but this is just kind of a graduated bump out where they kind of bring it out, so it does cut down on the intersection a little bit. But then they've still got the rollover, so, for example, what the mayor's talking about, you know, at night or something like that, you wouldn't have as many issues. You know, I don't think it has to be a lot more complicated than that, but
Right.
they use color concrete there because it's nice offset during the day, and it just kind of do it some beautification. And you can see they've got some smaller planters there kind of towards the corner, just to kind of provide that sort of differentiation.
Yep.
But I mean, I think that, you know, I saw that the other day when I was at the meeting with Councilmember Ferris over in Dodge Center. I just thought, well, that's a pretty good example of a recent project that Dodge Center did that I think would be beneficial.
Did they just do the same thing in Manorville for 57?
Manorville has some bump outs too.
Do they?
They
I
just
guess
added
they're not good
around.
enough to know.
Yeah, it's bumped out at the Huddle House there at the
Is it?
intersection, yeah, and the sheriff's department has reported that speed through there has reduced significantly, so down the hill to Manor.
When you're coming down the hill too, honestly, if you're coming from the north, the new, PED rule slows you down too, because if you're at 30,
Right.
you're bouncing, so you will slow down if,
Between the bump outs and having the county sheriff's office right there, I imagine it slows people down pretty good, but,
They've always been there, but
they've always been in, no. It's,
I think the bump outs, I mean, I've experienced myself coming down the hill, and again, the sheriff's department has been looking at it, so they haven't slowed them down, so.
So is it safe to say the council's on the same page that we're in favor of some kind of bump out there?
Yes.
That can give Brandon the direction that when you're doing your planning, let's explore what our option A, B, C, whatever you want to do with your planning?
Absolutely.
Does that sound fair?
keep
Yeah,
it simple and, but functional.
I was just gonna say, I think the biggest concern we had was the plowing in the winter, right? So are we gonna keep the planters out there and have the guys practice driving around a
Well, if we've
bump out?
decided that we're gonna do a bump out project, I think we could pull the planters. I know, having talked with Ben and Charlie, they had decided if we were gonna leave the planters out there, it wouldn't be a problem. They felt that they could navigate around those. But if we wanna pull them
Do
for
it
the
then.
winter, I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
I'm saying, I think we should leave it out there and let them have a winter where they plow around them,
Okay.
as if we had bump outs there.
If we did have bump outs, we could still add the planters up onto the sidewalk that you saw in the Dodge Center picture too, so they still could be utilized.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if they have a problem with it, or if it turns into an issue, then we can pull them.
But if we're gonna leave them out, we're gonna need to put some reflective taping on them then, for the dark days, or we're gonna have,
Or some very vibrant reflective paint.
well, but I mean, you're gonna need something on them, or it's gonna become a liability.
Right, like right now, just put something.
They would
Well,
just
I mean,
take
I certainly
get
think
some
what we
street
can do
paint
is,
and paint.
you know, they already use
Color.
markers, they use reflective markers to guide on the curbs where we don't have rollover curb. So, I mean, that's something simple as that, is putting something in, like a stake in the middle of that planter to delineate that it's got a reflective thing. I think that would be
Just
something we could
something
do. Yeah, well, that's a good idea.
to make for when you're trying to corner on a rainy day or dark day or snowy day, because we don't wanna have more issues than it's worth.
Sounds good to me.
I don't wanna name the constituent, but my wife said she wants to see plants in those, so at some point.
It'll look a lot better when they are plants in them, I'll
Yeah.
tell you that.
Yeah, too late
From
in
my own
season.
experience, yeah, too late for this year, but,
Mums.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have on my...
Budget for mom.
Thank you.
If there's anything else
I
I
bought
have
two
on my...
mums the other day, we don't have the budget for mums.
There are a couple other things if there's any questions, I'll take those, otherwise I've got two other things I just wanted to highlight. The one is a memo I have in there, which is a request for council action regarding dates. So in that memo, you can see, we approved our preliminary levy tonight. We've got, there's some desire for one meeting in November with schedules with Thanksgiving. So is that something the council's interested in doing a shift there or not? I know a couple of years we've had a problem, some years we haven't. So if we were gonna make one shift in November, we'd be looking at the 20th of November for our meeting. And then there's a couple other ones, just the dates for our meetings in December. So right now, we'd be looking at our final level hearing, a levy hearing on the 11th with a backup date of the 18th of December, just in case there are anything that we can't resolve on our regular meeting. So basically, we'd be moving that, the 25th up to the 18th, because obviously 25th is Christmas, so.
I'm in favor of the one meeting in November, because a few of the times the past few years, we have the meeting the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and it's a 15 or 20-minute meeting. We didn't really have a lot of business to discuss, so that way, that just kind of, the 20th might be a little longer meeting, but I'm in favor of that. And then our December ones, we do every year like that, so.
And if we did that, we just make sure we posted it well, so the public knows, so.
Sure, we'll actually post that out as soon as it's approved and get it out there. Linda's good about that.
And we can even remind, if we do it at the next meeting.
Yep.
Just remind, you know.
Any other feedback on that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, everybody's okay with that?
have problems with either way.
Okay. All right, so let's look at moving November to just one meeting on the 20th. We've got our regular meeting on the 11th in December, which is our levy discussion and approval of the final budget and resolution. We'll move the meeting from December 25th to the 18th of December as a backup date for well, it'll be our meeting, but then we'll have the backup date in case we don't approve our levy on the 11th. That's kind of our drop dead date on the 18th to have that approved into the county. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve those three changes.
I'd make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ryan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, and thanks, Linda, for getting that out there.
The only other thing I had to highlight, and I forgot to do it, I had it in my packet last time, but I didn't highlight it, and I really like to do this because I appreciate the hard work our staff does, is that we did get a $20,000 grant from the Smith, with the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. A lot of, I mean, you may or may not be aware, we've got this REV program ongoing to support our local entrepreneurs and our business community in Casson, and Ian put a lot of time and work into it, and he was able to get this $20,000, which I'll let him talk about what they're gonna be doing with that money.
Yeah, so the proposal for this grant is to work in collaboration with the Rochester Small Business Development Center to put on a number of educational workshop sessions here in Casson that entrepreneurs could attend and learn different business skills at, and then also host some more one-on-one sessions here in Casson, so just to avoid having people to make a commute into Rochester to have those conversations. So that's a lot of what the grant funding is going to go towards. So yeah, we're looking forward to it, and big thank you to Smith and Computer Financial for the funds.
Thanks, Ian, for applying for that and following through on it. Okay, on to the engineer's report.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just two quick items tonight. The first one being 16th Street Northwest, resolution to approve advance of state aid funds. Just a quick reminder to you, we have funding, $1.5 million grant to continue construction of 16th Street to the Dodge County Road. In this advance here would dip into our municipal state aid funds because they are currently at zero, so we're able to borrow ahead of the $300,000 we get a year. So this was a past direction to get that road built, and we're in the process of putting the plans together. So this is the formal resolution to tell MnDOT that we're looking for an advance. So let me pause there, see if you have any questions. We did something similar for the roundabout project too. We ended up not spending as much as we thought, but we still need an advance because we are at a current balance of zero, so.
How much is the advance?
I got $800,000 in here. We didn't quite have costs, so I had asked for the most that we could of $800,000. I'm not sure it's gonna be that much, but just wanna be safe than sorry.
We also had gotten a grant for this project too, correct?
Yep, the $1.5 million, so we'll obviously take that off the top. We are gonna likely be over $1.5 million, but I think less than the $800,000. But it's all gonna come out of state aid funds. Nothing's gonna come out of the city levy. Potentially the turn lane for the project that we approved previously would be the only thing, but so it'll be a minimal amount of spending on our side of things, so, other than we're taking money that we get every year from municipal state aid, so.
So we're looking at 2 to 3 years before we'll have money again for doing it?
Yeah, we're gonna be more than that, we're gonna be
projects?
probably 4 to 5. 5
They
is
had
the
to borrow
max, it'll be
their
like
own
4. because I think we're actually negative right now.
Oh, account balance isn't zero, it's negative.
Yeah, it's slightly
Oh,
negative, I
okay.
think like 100,000 in the hole.
Okay.
We can go 5 years negative, so we'll be less than 5 years and we're done, because we can't go any farther.
Yeah, as far as our projects are concerned, that shouldn't be a problem, right, for what we're anticipating?
Previous councils was 16th Street Roundabout, 16th Street going east, and 16th Street West were our three transportation projects that we can levy transportation dollars to, and also spend municipal state aid dollars. We only spend it on certain routes, generally have heavier traffic in town. So that's the route we've been going. We got the $1 million to go east, we got what was the roundabout project, $2 million to do that, and then now $1.5 million here for this one, so. And we've been supplementing with our municipal state aid money. Again, that's $300,000 a year that we get. That goes into our municipal state aid bank, I call it, and we just ask MnDOT to get those funds. Now we're just gonna go under, or below zero, which they allow. We'll just have to build it back up, and 7 years from now, we'll be talking to councils about what's the next transportation project we wanna do. So.
Because this will be an MSA street, now, the traffic count will actually be a positive for us because it'll be greater, likely, I would imagine, for folks coming from the northwest to school. We'll designate this road, it'll actually generate more dollars faster.
Absolutely. So, our municipal state aid, we can only allocate so much for our road and municipal state aid, and you can generate money two ways. One is population, that's gonna fix itself, and then two, traffic generation, or how many people are using our roads. So we took a downtown core, kind of by the old, water tower, and we moved it out to 16th Street, so we're getting, lot more traffic generation on 16th Street. And obviously, we punch this road through, we'll have a lot more traffic generation, so we're getting more money, so. So I think it's a good thing overall, because we're gonna borrow money, but then we're gonna generate more. It's not a ton more by traffic, but it is gonna add up, so, and it does.
But once that gets built, make sure you drive over 16th Street, a couple times back
See a
and
little
forth
black
every
tube
day.
going over the road, just keep stepping on it, too.
Do we get more money when I go through the path?
Well, you just gotta dip out in the road and go over with your bike in the road and back on the path.
If it goes bump, we'll be okay.
Yeah, let's just play it the right way, okay. All right, thanks, Brandon. So we'll take action on that. Is there any questions besides what we just had on the $800,000 advance on the MSAS dollars?
It's good investment.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution requesting that advance.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Paul. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Dan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Brandon, back to you.
Yeah, second item tonight, South Water Tower, this is that water tower, South Highway 14. In your council packet is a utility easement agreement with Egan Company, the owners of that property, to ultimately allow us to have rights to build the water tower on their property. It's gonna go in their very southwest corner, or the very, southwest corner of their property. We've looked at some plans, we approved a feasibility report, we're in plan production right now with looking at getting those plans on the street and getting something out to bid, with council approval here in this fall, potentially into early winter for next year's construction. So, this easement allows us to build it. It's similar to the fairgrounds water tower agreement that we had with the county fair when we built, our county fairgrounds, when we built that water tower there. Staff and the attorney have reviewed it. I think Egan's already signed it, so, we're ready to rock and build a water tower. So, just asking for formal consideration to approve that, to allow the mayor and the administrator, authorization to sign that.
Make the motion to approve that.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Just one clarification, do we actually give them $1, or do we send them a check?
We're giving them credit on their...
Okay, all right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
We're not giving them a
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you.
That's all I had.
Just as in consideration for $1. All right, thanks, Brandon, appreciate it. Personnel, nothing, city attorney, anything? No? Okay. Any questions on correspondence? Okay.
One thing I just wanted to highlight is, included in your packet, when we talked about the budget, we did have some CIP that folks had asked for from the fire department, and there's some big dollar items there. So we're gonna be having that at the EMS meeting coming up in October to talk about, some timeframes and how they wanna handle that. But just so you know, that's gonna go on to EMS first for consideration before it comes back for the, council for recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, with that, entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make the motion.
Thanks, Ryan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everybody.
Brandon,
Yeah.
has there ever been a thought of on 16th by the high school all the way to the base